So let me just start by saying welcome, and also no fandom is safe. If your feelings are hurt, good. It's a learning experience. I'm not going to be like deliberately mean. I'm only going to say what the truth is. Okay? Are we all clear? Sure. It is not my intention to hurt anyone's feelings on purpose. Okay? No fandoms. Fandoms are our best. We all know this. I'll just start there. Okay, so John, would you shut the door? Thanks, bud. You're the best. Okay, hi, I'm Allison. We're friends of Wales Cosplay. And I've got a bottle of water, so I look real. Yeah, I'm Allison. Nice to meet all of you. Thank you all for coming. Okay. So, a little more than 4 years ago, it was the summer after my senior year of college. High school, I'm not that old. My mom was like, Allison, we need to spend some bonding time together because you're going to go to college a state away and I'm not going to see you anymore. And I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? And she's like, well, let's just spend time together. And I'm like, okay, I'm watching Doctor Who. And she's like, cool, I don't understand anything. She's like, you're going to have to really fill me in. And I'm like, it's okay. So we sit down. I don't know how many of you are Doctor Who fans. Some, I think. And we're watching, we watched the episode, it was a Matt Smith episode. This was a rerun. And it was, it's called The Time of Angels. It's where they find the crash of the Byzantium and blah, blah, blah. And it's a 2-part episode. So we watched this whole thing, and my mom is very confused. She is like, what is going on? Who are these people? Who is this lady with the curly hair? Because we were sorry, this was the first time that Matt Smith, his doctor, had ever seen her. So I'm like having to fill my mom in, it's a big mess, and then it's like to be continued, and she's like, are you kidding me? So then we have to watch the second one, and she had to know what happened next, and then she was like, what happens after this? And she got hooked pretty easily, and she's like, well, I need to know what happens from the very beginning. I'm like, like 1963, Mom? And she's like, okay, maybe not that far, because whenever my mom was growing up watching Doctor Who, it was on PBS, and she just was waiting for it to be over so that she could watch Monty Python. And because all she knew about Doctor Who was that it was crappy, cardboard cutout monsters kind of thing, and she just wanted to watch Monty Python. And so I told her, well, if you really want to know what's going on, you're going to need to start from the very beginning. I mean, the very beginning with 2005. And so she did. So I go to work, I was working at Steak and Shake, I'd go to work, I would work my shift, and I'd come back, and in the period of 2 weeks, she had watched 10 years of television, as one does, and she was obsessed. I mean, outright obsessed. I mean, like, she writes fan fiction now, guys. So I mean, she was not satisfied as the way that many of us are with the way that the 10th Doctor and Rose's time together ended. She didn't like how it ended. She wasn't happy with anything. So she started writing fan fiction about this. And my mom at the time was like 49 or 50, and she normally screams at the TV about college football. But now she's screaming at the TV about Doctor Who, which she was still screaming at the TV, but at least I knew what she was screaming about. So every freaking day, and Sarah can attest to this, I'd be minding my own business, sitting in my room, and she would come talk to me and with some new theory about how the Doctor and Rose are going to meet in this alternate dimension, the real Doctor's going to come back and whatever, and I got real tired of it real fast. And suddenly I knew what it was like for me to be 14 and talking to her during the beginning of my Hitalia phase. You know. So, I talk a lot of crap on my mom, but her obsession has been pretty beneficial, actually. We've been to St. Louis and Dallas, and we've met Peter Capaldi, Matt Smith, David Tennant, Billie Piper, Catherine Tate, basically everybody. I think we've not met Alex Kingston and Karen Gillian. I think that's it. But anyway, so I cried when I met Peter Capaldi. It was a great time. Anyway, so it's been beneficial for my mom, but on my dad's side of things, my dad watched Doctor Who when he was a kid, and he had to get permission to use a long-distance call to call his friend whenever Tom Baker regenerated, because he didn't know what was going on. So he calls his friend and is like, "What's going on?" And his friend's like, "I don't know," because he had never seen this happen. So when Doctor Who starts up again in 2005, my dad starts to watch it, and I have like very vague memories of this because I'd get home from like whatever church thing I was doing Wednesday nights, and we would watch like Ghost Hunters on Sci-Fi, and then right after Ghost Hunters was Doctor Who. And I remember him trying to watch this, and I remember he didn't like it that much. And I was like 9, so like I didn't have any idea what was going on. And so then Sarah got me back into Doctor Who around like 2013. That sounds right. So 2013 rolls around, and I really like Matt Smith's Doctor. And I made my dad watch it. I'm like, they still have the old theme song, because that was burned into my brain. And but then Mom got into Doctor Who, and my dad did not at all. I mean, when Peter Capaldi became the Doctor, and suddenly it was like an older man was the Doctor again, my dad really liked that. And he was happy. He was happier to see the older Doctors again, as opposed to like the literal children who would come before him. And so I'm talking to my dad over Labor Day weekend, and I said, "Hey, have you seen the new Doctor Who, whatever?" And he's like, "Well, you see, I tried, but your mother has just been off the deep end with this, and I've had a really, hard time keeping up with it because of that." And I was like, "This sounds familiar," because my friend Morgan, you're right there, I'm sorry, you're right there. Because Morgan has said similar things about Homestuck and several other things. You used to cosplay characters from, you're wearing a Homestuck shirt now, but,
yeah.
It's
been a few years.
It's been, me too, The fandom at conventions and online has just been a little out of control. So I've heard this before from my dad, from you, from myself, from a lot of people. Like, another friend of mine used to really like My Little Pony. There's a mutual good, I guess, but once brony became a popular term and people began to understand what that meant, and the cringe culture associated with it began to dominate that corner of the internet, that person, my friend, gave up My Little Pony, basically completely. So I was thinking about this a lot, and I was like, can fandoms really ruin things? Can fandoms really destroy themselves? And how does this happen? And how can people really destroy things that they celebrate? So I started looking into things. So we're going to go back in time in a TARDIS. No, I'm kidding. So we're going to go back in time. We're going to go back to, this is some information from Sarah, our literary expert. So thanks to the Queen of Literature, our Lord and Savior, Mary Shelley, Gothic literature slowly rose in popularity, and people like Edgar Allan Poe became really popular. I can't imagine why. And however, alongside these, what would become masterpieces, there were these easy access romance novels, which were written by women for women. And these books are basically crap. They're total crap. You can buy, they're like the dollar store romance novels. It's like that, but like in the 19th century. And, you can go get like 5 of them for $1 at a gas station. So these stories follow a formula, the same way that modern pop music or modern dollar store romance novels follow a formula. Or how coffee shop AU fan fictions follow a formula. And they become mass-produced. Demand is high, and the market is just flooded with these things, and people who consider themselves real readers and real authors get very frustrated because they were interested in Gothic literature. They got really angry because suddenly the things that they like, the value has just decreased exponentially. Suddenly nobody cares. And if there was a good romance novel written somewhere, they'd have a hard time. Do you think that these people would give that a chance? No, because they just associate that with crappy dollar store romance novels. So as far as they know, the literature market has been swamped with these crappy, shameless dollar store romance novels, and that have ruined their hobby. And so a lot of this deals with like the role of women in literature, and I'm not going to go there. That's not what this is about. It's just food for thought. And so another very well-known example is Sherlock Holmes, everyone's favorite over-adapted character. So Sir Arthur Conan Doyle the author Sherlock Holmes, wanted to be taken more seriously than he was, but he was writing Sherlock because it made money. And he didn't consider detective fiction to be elite. And so he got really angry because people were like obsessed with Sherlock Holmes. Sound familiar? And he killed off Sherlock Holmes in a story called The Final Problem. And the fans retaliated. I mean, people went berserk. Like, one lady hits Arthur Conan Doyle with an umbrella for killing off Sherlock Holmes. People show up outside his house in Victorian-style mourning clothes, like all black dresses, like you've seen in the pictures. We've all watched Downton Abbey, but like all black clothing. People are literally mourning the death of Sherlock Holmes. Very similar to what happened if any of you watched The Walking Dead. People literally called into work whenever a certain somebody died. This last season, I won't go into it in case no one's seen it, but somebody dies, big surprise. And people literally called into work and they're like, we've lost a family member, I'm afraid I can't come into work today. Which, like, to be fair, I'd probably do that too. So yeah, people were mourning the death of Sherlock Holmes, and people were like, just beyond livid with Arthur Conan Doyle. And a very similar thing happened within the last decade. For those of us who have read Twilight, you may remember that Stephanie Meyer was going to publish a book called Midnight Sun. I think it ended up getting published, I don't know. But it was Twilight, it was the story of Twilight, but it was from Edward's point of view. And some overly obsessed fan got a hold of this and published the unfinished draft on the internet for anyone to read. And Stephanie Meyer was so distraught by this that it took her like years to get this thing completed. She was like, well, now I'm sad because everybody knows. Like, we all knew how Twilight ended anyway, all right? There's five movies, I don't know. Anyway, but this deals with like authors like and their own creations. So let's talk about fans. So my next point is subtitle The Brony Effect. Here we go. So My Little Pony has been around longer than I have been alive, longer than 20 years. But the real problem with the My Little Pony franchise begins in 2010, the TV show Friendship is Magic. The show was geared towards young girls and it's still like one of the most successful Hasbro productions of all time. I mean, by the end of season 1, viewership skyrockets from 1.5 million to like 4 million people. It's insane. I mean, it's huge. It's huge. So anyway, it's cute and it's funny, and it's just complex enough for parents to not hate it whenever they have to watch it with their kids. Adults watch My Little Pony. Like, you're an adult, I'm assuming. Okay, well, you're not the demographic but you still like it. It's not a bad show. And something weird happens with My Little Pony, though. Grown men begin to watch the show, which is not inherently problematic or bad. It's in fact it's probably good that grown men watch the show because it kind of it's nice to look past like toxic masculinity, which gets preached so much in media and whatever. So there's nothing wrong with like grown men watching My Little Pony inherently. It's funny and it's innocent, but these grown men came together via the internet and became known as bronies. And a flood of fan-created content sweeps the internet from DeviantArt to Tumblr to YouTube, everything. It does not take you very long if you get on DeviantArt to scroll down and see a painting of Twilight Sparkle that is better than anything you have ever made. It's fan-created content is not necessarily the problem. The problem arises when people do not put filters on their speech, their content, and their actions. A show that was directed for little girls, directed at little girls, now has pornographic fan art because some people just can't keep things to themselves and think it's funny. And because technology develops faster than the rules that govern it, you end up with a ton of less than family-friendly fandom material in very easily accessible places. If a 6-year-old was to go look up their favorite pony online, how long do you think it would take for them to find a picture of Applejack that they should not be seeing?
Bottom of the pictures.
Like,
Bottom of the
literally,
first page of Google.
yeah, bottom of the first page of Google. It's not hard, and especially, some of these things do get past safe search, and even if safe search is left on some of these things, it's just unavoidable. And so it's not hard for young fans to find things that they should not be seeing. And the second problem arises when the fandom refuses to take responsibility, and it's not necessarily the fandom's fault. You know, it's not the fandom's fault whenever people misbehave in their fandom. It's the issue is that just like in politics, there's a handful of crazy people who are very, very prolific and very loud, and the fandom lets it happen. You know, I have met bronies who are like, I think it's funny, you know, it's Rule 34 of the internet, and I'm like, that's not an excuse. It's not Rule 34. If you don't know what that is, it's not my responsibility to teach you. Go look it up. If you don't know what rule, okay, don't look up Rule 34. Just Rule 34. All right, I'll say it. If something exists, there is porn for it. That is Rule 34 of the internet, and that is not proper justification for letting things slide in fandom, especially with media directed at younger children. And it's not, you might think it's funny that this content exists, and, you know, sure, you have the right to create whatever you want, but it's not funny when, like, a little kid sees this, okay? Can we all agree on that?
Yeah.
Jeez, okay, thank you. This is children's media, people. So what happens after this? So bronies were a very short-lived phase in the mainstream media, just along the lines of, like, muffins are just ugly cupcakes, and RAR means I love you and dinosaur, and the phrase epic fail, and Chuck Norris jokes, all those things that have been swept under the rug of the internet that we never need to talk about again. You still see them around, you do still see them, but nobody wears like t-shirts proudly proclaiming that they're a brony anymore. Like, you used to be able to get those a Hot Topic and everyone could wear one, and now everyone is just ashamed. So they become a laughingstock of the internet, and in the real world too, which is like crazy that this has transcended into the real world, and they become an embarrassment to themselves. And so I like to call this act of a fandom embarrassing itself out of existence, the brony effect. So my next point, let's talk about Szechuan sauce, kids. So, Szechuan sauce. So, in Rick and Morty in this last season, at the beginning, Rick is like, I'm gonna get the Szechuan sauce, Morty. The Mulan Szechuan sauce was only available as a promotion for the movie Mulan in the 90s at McDonald's, and I'm gonna get it again, Morty. It's 100 seasons or whatever he says. So my friends and I actually went to Denton, Texas, which was the closest store to where we live, to get Szechuan sauce, because I thought it would be fun. You know, why not? I needed a road trip. And we stood in a long line. I mean, 200 people at one McDonald's. And apparently McDonald's grossly underestimated the amount, as we all know. And we had moved like maybe 5 feet in the line when people began to come out of McDonald's empty-handed. There was no more sauce. I think there was like 30 packets, I think is what one employee told us. 30 packets of Szechuan sauce for 100, 200 people. So like, I was in Denton, and people were disappointed, but, you know, pretty chill nonetheless. We had a good time. We just walked around in costume in Denton, Texas, which was fun. And we had a good time despite not having Szechuan sauce. However, as is expected, there are several cases of complete lunatics in the sauce fiasco, TN. Cops were called, embarrassing videos were tweeted, and it was just kind of a disaster all around. And thusly, the Rick and Morty fandom aligned itself with the bronies and suffered under the brony effect. No, the Rick and Morty fandom doesn't all suck. I love Rick and Morty. I will still cosplay, not Jennifer, Summer. It's been a long weekend. And they don't suck. Not everybody sucks. But they have ruined the little integrity that people had. I mean, this is, you know, anyway. Even like Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon like tweeted, they were like, this is not okay. I don't know why you guys thought this was okay. This is not, we are ashamed of you. They said that. The creators are ashamed of you. No. But this is like, that was kind of the final straw for the Rick and Morty fandom. You know, for months now, fans have been digging themselves into, the less than casual fans have been digging themselves into a hole of shame. Most of us have seen the meme. It's like, well, to be fair, you have to have a pretty high IQ to understand. Like, that was a real thing. That was a real post, and now it's become a copy pasta, so whatever. But, you know, people are like, it's so scientific. Okay, first of all, no, it's not. The show is about a scientist, but it's like, you know, Rick and Morty was originally a parody of Back to the Future. You don't have to understand anything about science to watch and enjoy Back to the Future. You don't have to understand anything about science to understand and enjoy Rick and Morty. And the real intelligence of Rick and Morty comes from emotional intelligence, and the show's greater themes are about, you know, depression, lack of belonging, dysfunctional families, and that's why it airs on Adult Swim and not Cartoon Network, because these themes are not something that a lot of children understand or can handle well. And you know, this is the same fandom who like totally lost its crap whenever they hired female writers, so I won't even go into that. So here's some other fandoms that have been subject to the Brony effect, just a brief list. Homestuck. Cosplayers paint themselves gray. Think it's hilarious to rub their gray paint on other people's cosplays, which it's not. Oh my gosh. And think it's okay to paint themselves gray and jump in the pools at conventions and turn the pool gray. Also not funny. Anything that really involves destroying of other people's property is not cool or funny. Hetalia. My darling Hetalia. First of all, I'm not going to go into it, but Anime Boston 2010 incident, where on the weekend of Passover, a lot of Hetalia cosplayers thought it would be funny. And we're all too young to have done this. This was not our fault. This was also in Boston. People on the weekend of Passover thought it'd be funny to do a Hitler salute outside the convention center during the photo shoot. And it was not, okay, first of all, it was the weekend of Passover. Second of all, it was like, the convention center was very close to like,
it was in front of the temple.
Yeah, it was in front of, I will get to it. Yeah. Anyway, and like, the sheer volume of both Hetalia and Homestuck cosplayers, because there's a ton. There's like over 140 characters in Homestuck. There's somewhat less characters in Hetalia, if you don't count all the 2Ps and all the extended universe stuff. The sheer number of people just who walk in crowds, in the mass volumes, just ransack convention floors. I've seen some crazy things that I won't get into. That's not what this is about, sort of. And the last one I'll talk about is SuperWhoLock. Some of you are ahead of me. The Sherlock fans are just, they have such entitlement. They are entitled. Murderous rhetoric of supernatural fans. Like, if you don't ship my ship, I'll send Castiel and the demons to come kill you, or what. I don't watch Supernatural, can you tell? And the childish immaturity of Doctor Who fans have really just beat this dead horse of embarrassment over and over again. And the weird phenomenon of SuperWhoLock is that it's mostly contained online, because it's kind of difficult. You know, when you get into things that are like, you have to cosplay real people, it's a little bit harder, so you don't see it as much at conventions. But the quality, as any fan will tell you, the quality of Supernatural and Sherlock have like plummeted. And after Peter Capaldi became the Doctor, and a bunch of like, I don't like to use the term fake fans, but a bunch of like people who were not willing to give him a chance as the Doctor because he was older, left the fandom, and so like viewership has gone down. Anyway, but and hardcore fans will tell you that SuperWhoLock has run itself into a deep dark corner of Tumblr. I won't go into that anymore, but yeah, there's plenty of fandoms who are subject to the Brony effect. I'm sure, you know, Rick and Morty, of course. Steven Universe has a chance to save itself. I think Steven Universe is still just holding its head above the water, just a little bit. Lots of things. It's very easy. So then my next point is growing up, whether you like it or not. So the world, the post-internet world has become much more accessible. Every single device, I think all of us have a device on us right now that can access any information in the world that we want right now. Younger and younger kids, thusly, have access to greater amounts of media, and sometimes adults don't know about it. When I was a kid, my parents could do like parental controls, or I was just really goody two-shoes and didn't do anything wrong ever. Like my parents were like, you can't watch Ed, Edd n Eddy because I don't know why, but I couldn't. Yeah, and so I didn't. I think the only thing I'd watched that I wasn't supposed to was like Teen Titans, because I watched it at my friend's house. I don't know why my mom had an issue with it. I think it was because I wanted to be Raven for Halloween, and I said something about meditation, and my mom was like, of course now she wouldn't care. But anyway, but if I had grown up with a smartphone, as so many kids do nowadays, I would have been able to watch all the Ed, Edd n Eddy I wanted, and my parents probably wouldn't have known about it. Especially my mom, who can't even be bothered to turn her phone screen off when she puts it back in her purse. I won't go into that. I'm calling you out, Mom. But yeah, like, we've all heard kids, I'm sure we've all heard kids, like little kids, talk about pieces of media that they should not have an understanding of or should not be watching. Like, I've heard, it's cute to dress your 5-year-old up as Dragon Lady from Game of Thrones, but I really hope to God you're not letting your child watch Game of Thrones, unmonitored at least. And I've babysat kids whose parents let them watch The Walking Dead. I can't even watch The Walking Dead. It freaks me out. I don't do blood. How does a little kid watch The Walking Dead, and anyway, we're not getting into that. So where am I going with this? Younger and younger kids will hear things from their friends, from their older siblings, from the internet, wherever, and they will go in search of that thing. I heard about Hitalia from Morgan and Sarah. Maybe just Morgan. It's Morgan's fault. This is Morgan's fault. I heard about Hitalia from Morgan, and if I had said this, if I had watched Hitalia in front of my parents, there's no way that they would have let me watch that. I mean, now they don't care. I'm 20. I can do whatever I want. But I was 14, and I've heard kids as young as 8 quote Rick and Morty, and I'm like, okay, sure, it's not that bad. There's some swearing, and if you watch a censored version, it's not that bad. But, how can a kid as young as 8 be expected to wrap their minds around things like existential crises or King Jellybean?
Well, that's
Yeah, I'll go there. And then going back to Hitalia, as everything always does, not to sound like a self-righteous Rick and Morty fan, but Hitalia does have some advanced humor in it, and you have to understand the historical or pop culture references in Hitalia in order for the jokes to make any sense. In the last season that came out in the English dub, they were talking about the War of Devolution, and then the narrator says, but that doesn't have anything to do with 80s synth bands like Devo. I love Devo. I found that hilarious. I pause it because I was laughing too hard. But one of my friends who was watching it with me was like, what? So then I was like, well, here's what Devo is. But you have to understand at least some of the pop culture references for the jokes to not fall flat. Or the historical references, like when Italy is talking about, I'm making 9 million marks per day, but an egg is 6 trillion marks, so an omelet is a month of work. That's hilarious if you understand inflation in Germany post-World War I.
Yeah.
I won't get into that. But anyway, I'm constantly reminded, because I rewatch the show from time to time, and I'm constantly reminded of how funny the show is. It still holds up. And I catch new things every time. Like when I first watched Italia, I didn't understand the Italy making an omelet is a month of work joke. But now, after I had taken a couple of history classes, I thought that was pretty freaking hilarious. So you can imagine my struggle when a 10-year-old dressed up as Sealand or whatever comes up to me and tries to talk about Hitalia from extended reaches of the fandom, talking about things that they should know about, and often these kids have no concept of what they're talking about, and I imagine that it's a much less consequential version of how the media feels whenever Trump can't conduct an interview in complete sentences. I won't go there. So when a middle school aged kid reaches or approaches media that is not intended for them to consume, what happens? Well, one, immaturity runs rampant at conventions and online. Same thing with with Supernatural. If you're don't ship this thing, people are well, the demons are going to come after you, and Castiel or whatever is going to come murder you, and it's that's not okay to say. I don't know what made you think that was okay to say. People get very embarrassed by cringe culture that is because of younger people consuming media that they're not intended to consume, and they leave their fandom because they are so embarrassed by it. And so rampant immaturity, or kids are forced to grow up faster, and kids, especially young women. Young girls, I don't want to say women because that's part of the problem, are over-sexualized in the media. How many of us watch Stranger Things? Basically everybody. So, the girl who plays 11, Millie, yes, that's her name. She was listed on an unofficial thing. This is not official, but the fact that it exists is terrifying. She was listed as one of the sexiest actresses of the year. She's 13. She's not even 13.
That was a mistranslation.
It was?
Yeah, it would actually, the original meant it was hottest as in most popular.
Okay,
And it got
I'll take
mistranslated
that.
to sexiest.
Okay, that's fair. I'll take that. Thank you. But still, how many, we've all seen those posts online that are 14-year-olds, like me when I was 14 and 14-year-olds now. When I was 14, I was wearing a t-shirt and jeans and or gauchos, heaven forbid. And that was that. And 14-year-olds now, you see pictures of 14-year-olds on Instagram because everyone's got access to social media, wearing big old push-up bras and short shorts, and it's this person doesn't look 14, and this is the media's fault, okay? This is the media's fault. This is the patriarchy's fault. I'll say that word, patriarchy. I'll scare all of you. Feminism. This is the media's fault. Children get over-sexualized, and they are forced to grow up much faster than they should ever have to be. We don't live in the Middle Ages where people only live to be 40 years old and you have to be an adult by the time you're 14. You need your childhood. It makes you a well-rounded person. So anyway, it's very difficult to control the media that kids consume, and there is infinite controversy over whether or not it's our responsibility to make kids mature faster, which personally I don't think it is. I don't think we should be forcing kids to grow up faster. But that's a topic for another day. But just food for thought. So on the other side of things is everyone's favorite. What?
Yeah.
Yep. I didn't understand. I thought this was an hour. 10:45 or 11:45.
My thing says
Okay.
12:15.
Originally it said 10 anyway. So fandom toxicity, I'll try to wrap this up. So bullying children for their art or fandom creations is not okay. I don't know why people think it's okay. Don't do that. Aggressive debates about shipping. I posted in the A2F group, I said, what ruins fandoms for you? And overwhelmingly, people were like, ship wars. I don't care if someone doesn't ship the same crap as you. It's not the end of the world, alright? Unless it's a problematic ship that involves pedophilia or underage or non-consensual things, it's not a deal, okay? Just whatever. Excusing problematic behavior for the sake of fans' characters, headcanon, or convenience, don't do that. Gatekeeping, especially against younger fans. Fandom toxicity will destroy fandoms. It will. Anyway. And I'll just briefly state this. If anyone under the age of 25 remembers at least a little bit of time when it was not cool to be a fan of something, and with the internet and with people having much more access to these things, anybody can be a fan of whatever they want nowadays. And so a lot of times older people will be like, well, I was a fan of this thing whenever it wasn't cool. Who cares, okay? I don't care. We are all here now, and you're not special anymore. I'm sorry. Life sucks, okay? So it's hard to feel, one of my favorite articles about this topic said, it's hard to feel special when you're facing a crowd of millions of people. A lot of bad-behaving fans look for an excuse to be oppressed so that they can separate themselves from the mainstream. So what I will say for all of you is go out into the world, and think, if I saw somebody behaving the way that I am behaving, what would I think of that fandom? And how can I make my fandom a better place? Anyway, that's all. Sorry to go over time. I thought I had an hour, but anyway.
It's okay. We're trying to keep a projected face because of the bunch of Overwatch.